Poor girl with her baby falls asleep on a CEO's shoulder on a flight, but wakes up shocked when he... Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The crying pierced through the airplane cabin like a siren. Heads turned, passengers sighed, and a young mother whispered apologies no one seemed to hear. Rachel Martinez cradled her 6-month-old daughter, Sophia, close against her chest, rocking her gently as the seatbelt sign glowed red above. Her arms ached, her eyes stung, and exhaustion sat heavy on her shoulders like an invisible weight. The late-night flight from Los Angeles to Chicago had been her only option. Bought with the last of her savings, she had promised her sister she would attend the wedding. Promises mattered, even when money did not. Sophia's cries grew louder, sharp and helpless. "Please, sweetheart, please," Rachel murmured, bouncing her tiny body, feeling every stare burning holes through the back of her thrift store jacket. A businessman 2 rows ahead groaned audibly. A flight attendant approached, polite but cold, reminding her that other passengers were trying to rest. Rachel nodded, voice trembling. "I am trying, ma'am." Shame flushed her cheeks. She could not blame them. She was tired too, tired of being the mother everyone pitied and the woman everyone judged. The hum of the engines blurred into white noise as Sophia's wails turned into soft hiccups. Rachel leaned back, eyes half closed, when a calm voice spoke beside her. "Excuse me, may I try something?" She turned, startled. The man in the aisle seat wore a navy blue suit that fit too perfectly for economy class. His tie was loosened, his hair neat, his eyes the color of clear sky. "I have nieces," he added with a faint smile. Sometimes a different voice helps. His tone was gentle, not intrusive. Desperation made her nod. Carefully, she placed Sophia into his arms. The baby blinked, curious, and within seconds, the crying stopped. The stranger began humming a low, soothing tune, and the cabin seemed to exhale with relief. Rachel watched, astonished. "How did you do that?" she whispered. "Practice," he said quietly, "and a bit of patience." His hand rested lightly on the baby's back, steady and sure. Rachel noticed the faint scent of cologne mixed with something softer, maybe cedar and paper. She wanted to ask his name, but fear of seeming forward kept her silent. As Sophia's breathing evened out, Rachel's own tension began to melt. For the first time in days, her body loosened into the seat. The stranger looked down at the baby, smiling as if the world outside the tiny row of seats did not exist. "She reminds me of someone," he murmured. Rachel managed a small laugh, surprised by the warmth of it. "Someone noisy, someone honest," he replied. His gaze lingered on Sophia's sleeping face, then shifted toward Rachel, not pitying, just kind. The engines droned, the cabin lights dimmed, and Rachel's eyelids grew heavy. Without realizing, she drifted asleep, her head leaning gently against his shoulder. The man did not move. He simply adjusted his posture so she could rest more comfortably, his expression unreadable in the soft cabin light. Outside, the plane sliced through clouds, carrying strangers who would not stay strangers for long. When Rachel woke again, the cabin lights had softened to a warm glow, and for a brief moment she forgot where she was. The low hum of the engines reminded her. Sophia was still asleep, her small head nestled securely against the stranger's chest, his hand resting protectively over her back. Rachel sat up quickly, embarrassment rushing to her face. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "I must have fallen asleep." The man turned to her, his calm smile easing her panic. "It is all right. You both look like you needed the rest." Rachel's cheeks warmed. "You have been holding her this whole time?" He nodded. She did not mind the company. He handed the baby back gently, careful not to wake her. Rachel cradled Sophia again, her heart full of gratitude and confusion. "Thank you really," she said softly. "You have no idea how much this means." "You do not owe me thanks," he replied. "Sometimes a little kindness is just what people should do for each other." His words settled in her chest like something she had not realized she had been missing. Outside the window, dawn began brushing the clouds with faint streaks of pink and gold. The announcement of the captain broke the fragile stillness, informing passengers they would begin descending into Chicago soon. The man leaned back, straightening his jacket. "First time flying with a baby?" he asked. "Second," Rachel admitted. "The first time was just a short flight to San Diego. She screamed the entire time. I swore I would never do it again, but family is family." He chuckled quietly. "You are brave." "Or desperate," Rachel said, half smiling. "This ticket cost more than my rent." She realized how that must sound and immediately regretted saying it. But the man did not laugh. Instead, his expression softened. Sometimes the hardest journeys are the ones that matter most. Rachel looked at him properly then. His features were composed but tired in a different way, the kind of tired that comes from too much responsibility, not too little. He had the quiet air of someone used to being obeyed but not necessarily seen. There was something familiar about him, though she could not place it. Maybe she had seen his face in a newspaper or a company brochure somewhere. "You travel often?" she asked. "Too often," he said. "It feels like I live in the sky more than on the ground." "That sounds lonely." "It can be," he admitted. For a moment, neither spoke. The overhead lights flickered as the plane began to descend through soft clouds. The baby stirred, letting out a small sigh before settling again. The man looked at her with genuine warmth. "She is beautiful," he said. "What is her name?" "Sophia," Rachel answered proudly. "She is the best thing I have ever done." He smiled. "It shows." A flight attendant came by, checking seatbelts for landing. Her eyes lingered on Rachel and the man beside her, perhaps recognizing the tenderness in their silence. When the plane touched down, applause rippled softly through the cabin. Rachel's stomach fluttered. It was almost over. She turned toward him to say goodbye, but he was already reaching into his briefcase. He pulled out a crisp handkerchief and offered it to her. "You have milk on your sleeve," he said kindly. She blushed, taking it. "You really are observant." "Comes with the job," he said, standing up as passengers began to move. "I hope the wedding goes well." Rachel blinked. "How did you know?" "You talked in your sleep," he said with a teasing glint. "Something about a bouquet and a promise." Her face went red again, and he laughed softly, adjusting his tie. "Do not worry. Your secret is safe with me." As they waited for the aisle to clear, he held out his hand. "I am James," he said. "James Carter." "Rachel," she replied, shaking his hand. "Rachel Martinez." "It was nice meeting you, Rachel Martinez," he said, his voice low and sincere. "You and your daughter take care." She watched him walk down the aisle, his tall frame disappearing among the crowd of passengers. Something about him lingered in the air, an unspoken calm, a feeling that their paths might cross again. When she finally stepped off the plane, the morning light poured through the terminal windows, and Rachel breathed it in like hope. What she did not know was that James Carter was not just any traveler. By the end of the day, she would discover that the man who had rocked her baby to sleep was the billionaire CEO whose company had once been her dream workplace. The terminal buzzed with the usual morning chaos, rolling suitcases, echoing announcements, and the faint scent of coffee drifting from nearby kiosks. Rachel balanced Sophia on her hip, still half dazed from the flight. The exhaustion of the night was fading, replaced by a strange mix of calm and confusion. She could still feel the warmth of the man's shoulder against her cheek and the way his voice had softened when he spoke to her baby, James Carter. The name lingered in her mind like a melody she could not forget. He had left before she could properly thank him, disappearing into the stream of travelers as if the moment they shared had been nothing more than a dream. She sighed, adjusting Sophia's blanket, and headed toward baggage claim. The carousel groaned to life, and soon she was pushing a borrowed stroller through the crowded terminal toward the exit. Her sister's fiancé was supposed to pick her up, but every call went to voicemail. It did not matter. She had learned not to depend on others long ago. A few hours later, she was at her sister Carmen's small apartment on the south side of the city. The place smelled like fresh paint and coffee, and the sound of wedding music rehearsals drifted faintly from the living room. Carmen was already in full planning mode, surrounded by boxes of decorations. "You made it," Carmen exclaimed, rushing over to hug her. "You look exhausted, Rach. Was the baby all right on the plane?" Rachel smiled faintly. She had a rough start, but she fell asleep eventually. A stranger helped. "A stranger?" Carmen raised an eyebrow, smirking. "Was he at least cute?" Rachel rolled her eyes. "You are impossible. He was kind, that is all." "Kind and cute usually go together," Carmen teased, returning to her ribbons. Rachel let it slide. Her thoughts were elsewhere. She could still hear his voice saying, "Sometimes a little kindness is what people should do for each other." It had sounded simple, but it carried the weight of sincerity. Later that afternoon, while Carmen was out running errands, Rachel took Sophia for a walk near the apartment complex. The November wind was sharp, and the city skyline shimmered against a pale grey sky. She found a small cafe at the corner, the kind of place with fogged windows and the smell of cinnamon rolls. Inside, warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. She ordered a cup of hot chocolate and sat by the window, rocking Sophia gently in her stroller. As she sipped the drink, her phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from an employment agency she had applied to weeks ago. The subject line read, "Interview Opportunity, Meridian Technologies." Her heart skipped. Meridian Technologies. She knew that name. Everyone did. It was one of the largest corporations in the country, known for its innovations and its famously private CEO, James Carter. Rachel blinked, staring at the screen. The same James Carter? It seemed impossible. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But the thought refused to leave her mind. She scrolled through the message. The interview was for a temporary accounting position. She had a degree, though motherhood had forced her to put her career on hold. Maybe this was her chance to start again. She looked down at Sophia, who was smiling in her sleep, and whispered, "We might just get lucky, baby girl." The next morning, Rachel arrived at Meridian Tower, the sleek glass building rising like a monument to ambition. She wore her best outfit, a navy blouse and black slacks, and clutched a neatly printed resume. The receptionist guided her to the 15th floor, where the interview would take place. Her palms were sweating as she stepped into the waiting room. On the wall hung a framed photograph of the company's leadership team. Her breath caught. There he was, James Carter, the same calm eyes, the same face she had memorized on the plane. He was not just any traveler. He was the man who ran the company she was now interviewing for. For a moment, Rachel's knees felt weak. What were the odds? Before she could collect her thoughts, the assistant opened the door. "Miss Martinez, they are ready for you." Rachel forced a smile, smoothing her blouse, and followed her inside. The panel of interviewers sat around a glass table. At the far end, someone entered quietly through another door. She looked up. It was him, James Carter. Their eyes met, and in that brief instant, recognition flashed across his face. He looked genuinely surprised, then composed himself quickly, his tone calm and professional. "Good morning, Miss Martinez," he said. "Please, have a seat." Rachel's heart pounded as she obeyed. The room seemed to shrink around her. The man who had held her baby and offered comfort at 30,000 feet was now sitting across from her as the CEO of the company she dreamed of working for. Rachel's pulse quickened as the interview began, the sound of her own heartbeat almost drowning out the voices around the polished glass table. James Carter's presence at the far end of the room was impossible to ignore. He was every bit as composed as he had been on the flight, but now the setting made his quiet authority unmistakable. His tailored suit, the subtle confidence in his tone, the respectful silence of the other executives when he spoke it all, painted a picture of someone used to control. "Tell us about your previous experience," one of the senior managers asked. Rachel forced herself to focus. She described her background in accounting, the years she had worked before Sophia was born, and the temporary positions she had taken since. Her voice steadied as she spoke about her determination to rebuild her career, to provide stability for her daughter. James listened silently, his expression unreadable, though his gaze lingered on her longer than was typical. When she mentioned her daughter, a flicker of something, perhaps recognition, perhaps admiration, crossed his face. When the interview ended, Rachel thanked the panel and stood to leave. James rose as well. "Miss Martinez," he said, his voice low but clear, "could you stay for a moment? I would like a brief word." The others exchanged glances but did not question him. When the door closed behind the last interviewer, Rachel turned to face him, her heart thudding. "I did not realize you were the James Carter," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "And I did not expect to see you here either. Life has a strange way of arranging coincidences. If this makes things awkward, I understand," she said quickly. "I promise I did not know." "It is not awkward," he said, shaking his head. "You were one of the few people who treated me like a person on that flight. Most see only the name." His tone softened. "You mentioned that ticket cost more than your rent. That is not something I forget easily." Rachel's face flushed. "Please, do not feel sorry for me." "I do not," he said gently. I respect you. The sincerity in his voice made her throat tighten. He gestured toward a chair. Sit, if you have a moment. She hesitated, then did. The office was modern but not cold, sunlight spilling through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. You are overqualified for the temporary position, he began. But there is a department struggling with audits and budget revisions. It is not glamorous, but it is stable. Would you be open to that? Of course, Rachel said, her eyes widening. Thank you. You earned the chance, he replied simply. Report to Human Resources this afternoon. They will handle the paperwork. She stood, her knees a little unsteady. Mr. Carter James, she corrected herself quickly. Thank you for your kindness. He smiled again, that same calm expression she had seen when he held Sophia. You do not need to thank me. Just do the work well. That will be thanks enough. When Rachel left the building, her chest felt lighter than it had in months. She had walked in with nothing but hope and walked out with a job. That evening, as she fed Sophia her bottle, she whispered, "We did it, baby girl." The apartment smelled faintly of lavender from the cheap candle she had lit to celebrate. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to dream about a future that did not feel like survival. Meanwhile, in his office high above the city, James watched the lights come on across the skyline. His assistant, Mark, stepped inside. You seem distracted, sir. James gave a small smile. Do you remember that flight from Los Angeles? The crying baby? Hard to forget, Mark said, amused. You told me about it when you landed. James nodded. That was her, Rachel Martinez. Mark raised his eyebrows. Small world. Or maybe fate, James said quietly. Either way, I think she is the kind of person this company needs. He turned back to the window, the reflection of the city shimmering in the glass. For the first time in years, he felt something unexpected, stirring a quiet admiration for a woman who had nothing but dignity and strength to her name. Rachel's first week at Meridian Technologies passed in a blur of early mornings, spreadsheets, and cautious hope. The accounting department was larger than any office she had worked in before, filled with the quiet rhythm of keyboards and the hum of fluorescent lights. Most of her co-workers were polite but distant, focused on their own deadlines. Still, Rachel did her best to blend in, grateful just to have a stable paycheck again. Every evening, she would pick up Sophia from the daycare across the street, her tiny face lighting up the moment she saw her mother. That simple smile made every long hour worth it. On Friday afternoon, as the team prepared for their weekly review, Rachel's supervisor, a stern woman named Miss Langford, stopped by her desk. The CEO wants a detailed summary of our expense reports before his meeting on Monday. You are new, but you seem organized. Can you handle it? Rachel hesitated. Yes, ma'am. I can stay late if needed. Miss Langford nodded curtly. Good. Impress him. He has a sharp eye for numbers. When the rest of the team packed up for the weekend, Rachel stayed behind, her desk lamp casting a soft circle of light. The office quieted, leaving only the faint buzz of the ventilation system. She worked methodically, double-checking every entry. Hours passed before she realized she was alone. The elevator chimed, and she looked up to see James Carter step out, his jacket draped over one arm. She stood quickly. Mr. Carter, I did not expect anyone to be here this late. He smiled slightly. Neither did I. But the best work usually happens after everyone else goes home. He walked over, glancing at her computer screen. Expense reports. Not the most exciting way to spend a Friday night. Maybe not, Rachel admitted. But I like making sense of things. Numbers do not lie. That they do not, he agreed. He studied her for a moment, the quiet hum of the office filling the space between them. You remind me of someone I used to know, someone who believed hard work could fix anything. Rachel looked down, unsure how to respond. Sometimes it can, she said softly, and sometimes it just keeps you from falling apart. James nodded thoughtfully. That is true. He reached into his pocket and placed a small wrapped chocolate on her desk. For staying late, consider it an executive bonus. The gesture caught her off guard. Thank you, she said, smiling despite herself. Do you often bribe your employees with candy? Only the ones who actually deserve it, he said, his tone teasing but kind. He lingered a moment longer, as if he wanted to say more, then glanced at the clock. Do you have a ride home? I take the train, she replied. It is about 30 minutes. At this hour, he frowned. The trains can be unreliable after dark. Let me call a company car. That is not necessary, she said quickly. Really? He looked at her, the concern in his eyes genuine. At least let me walk you downstairs. She hesitated, then nodded. The elevator ride was silent except for the soft whirring of machinery. When the doors opened, the lobby was empty, its marble floor gleaming under dim lights. Outside, the night air was cold. "Thank you for walking me down," Rachel said. "And for the chocolate." "You are welcome," he replied. "Be careful, Rachel." Her name sounded different, coming from him, gentler, almost protective. She nodded and started toward the station, the sound of her footsteps echoing on the sidewalk. James watched until she disappeared around the corner before turning back toward the building. For reasons he could not explain, he felt uneasy letting her walk alone. Rachel's train arrived 10 minutes later, nearly empty. She sat by the window, clutching her bag, still replaying their conversation in her mind. For years, she had avoided men like him, powerful, distant, untouchable. But something about James Carter was different. He had seen her not as a burden, not as a problem to fix, but as a person. As the train rumbled toward home, Rachel looked down at the small chocolate still in her hand and smiled. For the first time in a long time, the world did not feel quite so cold. Monday morning came with the rush of traffic and the hum of coffee machines across Meridian Tower. Rachel arrived early, clutching a paper cup of black coffee, her nerves sharper than usual. The elevator doors slid open, revealing the polished corridor of the accounting floor. Her desk was tidy as always, her reports stacked neatly, but something in the air felt different. She could not explain why. Around mid-morning, a notification appeared on her computer screen. Meeting with CEO, Conference Room B, 11 o'clock. Her heart skipped. It was unusual for a junior staff member to be summoned directly by the CEO. As she gathered her files, her mind raced. Had she made a mistake in the reports? When she entered the conference room, James was already there, leaning slightly over a set of charts. Sunlight from the tall windows glinted off his cufflinks. He looked up and smiled. "Miss Martinez, please, come in." Rachel took a seat, trying to appear composed. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. "Quite the opposite," he said. "Your audit corrections last week uncovered a major error in our expense tracking system. You may have saved the company thousands of dollars." Rachel blinked, surprised. "I was just double-checking figures. I did not think it was that serious." "It was," he said, his tone warm. "You have an instinct for details. That is not something you can teach." For a moment, there was a comfortable silence, broken only by the muffled sounds of the office outside. James set the papers aside. "There is a charity event this weekend," he said. "Our accounting department needs someone to represent internal operations. It is informal, family-friendly. Would you be interested?" Rachel hesitated. "A charity event?" "Yes," he said. "Meridian sponsors several community programs. It would be good exposure for you, and I think you might enjoy it." She wanted to say yes immediately, but the thought of arranging childcare made her pause. "I will need to check if someone can watch my daughter," she said honestly. James nodded. "Of course. Do not feel pressured." Later that day, while she worked through spreadsheets, her phone buzzed with a message from Carmen. "I can take Sophia this Saturday if you need." Rachel smiled. Maybe the universe was on her side for once. On Saturday afternoon, she arrived at the Meridian Community Center, dressed modestly in a cream blouse and long skirt. The event was lively children laughing, volunteers handing out meals, and banners displaying Meridian's logo. James was near the main stage, speaking with the event coordinator. When he saw Rachel, his face lit up with quiet recognition. "You made it," he said. "I was not sure if you could." "My sister came through," Rachel replied, smiling. "This is amazing. I did not expect such a big turnout." "It is my favorite project," James said. "We fund after-school programs and small business grants for single parents." His eyes softened as he spoke, and Rachel noticed a rare warmth in his demeanor. He was not the distant executive everyone whispered about in the office. He was human, kind, and genuine. As they walked among the booths, several employees greeted James respectfully, some surprised to see him so casually engaged. One older volunteer handed Rachel a small paper flower made by the children. "For good luck," she said. Rachel thanked her and tucked it into her pocket. Later, while they reviewed donation records together, A small boy stumbled nearby and dropped his ice cream. Without hesitation, James knelt, cleaned the mess, and comforted the child. Rachel watched the simple act unfold and felt an unexpected wave of admiration. Power had not changed him. It seemed to humble him. "You are good with kids," she said softly when he returned. "I was not always," he admitted. Work made it easy to forget what matters. As the sun began to set over the park, Rachel looked at him differently, not as her boss or the powerful CEO, but as a man trying to do something right. When they parted that evening, James said, "Thank you for coming, Rachel. You made today better." She smiled, tucking the paper flower tighter in her hand. "So did you." Neither of them realized it yet, but this day would mark the beginning of something neither ambition nor circumstance could have planned. The following week at Meridian felt lighter, almost hopeful. The charity event had left a quiet glow that lingered between Rachel and James, unspoken yet undeniable. Their interactions remained professional, but every glance carried a faint echo of something warmer. Rachel continued to excel at her work, earning subtle nods of approval from her supervisors. Still, she made sure to stay grounded. Life had taught her that good moments could vanish quickly, like sunlight slipping through clouds. On Wednesday afternoon, while reviewing invoices in her cubicle, she overheard two co-workers whispering near the printer. "Did you hear? The CEO personally requested Rachel for the quarterly report," one said. "No one gets that kind of attention unless something is going on." The words stung more than she expected. Rachel kept her head down, pretending not to hear. She had worked too hard to be reduced to rumors. That evening, she stayed late again, determined to finish her report before the morning meeting. When the office emptied, James appeared in the doorway, his sleeves rolled up, the formality of his day stripped away. "You should not still be here," he said, setting down a coffee cup. "That is my line," she replied with a tired smile. "Besides, I'm almost done." He handed her the cup. "Decaf. I thought you might need it." She accepted it, warmth spreading through her cold fingers. "You really do not have to do things like this, Mr. Carter." "Maybe I want to," he said quietly. There was a stillness between them, not uncomfortable but charged with understanding. Rachel looked back at her screen, trying to steady her heartbeat. "People are starting to talk," she admitted. "About what?" "About why you keep stopping by. They think," she trailed off, "they think something is going on." James's expression softened, but there was a shadow of frustration behind his calm. "Let them think what they want. I'm not going to hide being decent." "You do not owe me kindness," she said softly. "I do not," he agreed, "but I choose to give it." The sincerity in his voice left her momentarily speechless. Outside, rain began to patter against the tall windows, the city lights blurring into gold and silver streaks. The sound filled the silence that followed. "You once told me numbers do not lie," he said finally. "But people do. They build walls out of fear. I used to be one of them." "What changed?" Rachel asked. He hesitated, his gaze distant. "My father passed away 3 years ago. We never reconciled. He worked himself into the grave, chasing perfection. I promised myself I would not make the same mistake, but sometimes I still forget." His honesty caught her off guard. The man everyone admired from afar had cracks, and they made him human. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "Loss never really leaves us." He nodded. "No, it does not." The clock on the wall ticked past 9. James straightened, slipping his hands into his pockets. "Finish your report tomorrow. Go home to your daughter." Rachel smiled faintly. "You remembered." "Of course I did," he said. "Sophia Wright, the one who stole the show on that flight." She laughed softly. "She would be proud to know she met a CEO before her first birthday." "I would like to meet her again," he said before he could stop himself. The words hung in the air, delicate and bold at once. Rachel froze, then nodded slowly. "Maybe one day." "One day," he repeated, his tone gentle. As he turned to leave, Rachel watched the reflection of his retreating figure in the glass. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the city lights shimmered like distant promises. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but something deep inside her whispered that their story was only beginning to unfold. The following morning, Rachel woke to the faint sound of rain against her window and the soft breathing of Sophia sleeping beside her. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to lie still, feeling the rare peace that came with a quiet morning. Life had not been easy, but lately it had begun to feel manageable. She had a steady job, a routine, and the faint but growing warmth of something she could not quite name every time James Carter crossed her mind. At the office, the air buzzed with energy. The quarterly review was approaching, and tension hummed through every department. Rachel threw herself into her work, determined to prove she belonged there. She avoided the gossip, ignored the curious glances, and focused on her spreadsheets. Yet even in her focus, she could feel the unspoken awareness whenever James entered the room. That afternoon, as she reviewed expense data in the conference area, James stopped by with a folder in hand. "Can I have a minute?" he asked. She nodded, following him to his office. The door closed softly behind them, muting the noise of the floor outside. "I have been meaning to ask," he began, leaning against the edge of his desk. "How is Sophia doing?" The simple question caught her off guard. "She is doing great," Rachel said, smiling instinctively. "She started trying to stand this week. It is chaos, but the good kind." James chuckled. "I remember my niece at that age. Everything was an adventure." "Everything still is," Rachel said softly. "Even the little things." He studied her for a moment. "You make it sound like that is a bad thing." "Not bad," she said. "Just fragile. Good things always feel like they can disappear." He looked down briefly, then met her gaze again. "Maybe that is why they matter." The words hung between them, simple yet heavy with meaning. Before either could speak again, there was a knock on the door. It was Miss Langford, holding a folder. "Mr. Carter, we have the updated figures you requested." Her eyes flicked between them, suspicion flashing for a second before she placed the papers on the desk and left. James sighed. "Rumors again?" Rachel asked quietly. "Probably," he admitted. "But I stopped caring what people think a long time ago." She smiled faintly. "I am still learning how." "You will," he said. "People see what they want to see. The truth takes patience." As she left his office, Rachel caught her reflection in the hallway glass, professional, composed, but with a spark of something alive behind her eyes. That evening, the rain had cleared, leaving the city washed and glistening. She picked up Sophia from daycare, the little girl babbling happily in her arms. On the way home, they stopped at the park. The air smelled of wet earth and leaves. Sophia clapped her hands at the sight of pigeons scattering. Rachel laughed, the sound light and unguarded. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from James. "Thank you for today. You remind me that work can mean something more." Rachel read it twice before replying. "Thank you for believing in people like me." She slipped the phone back into her pocket, her heart steady but warm. Days passed, and though they remained professional in the office, the quiet connection between them deepened. Sometimes it was a glance across a meeting table, sometimes a shared smile in the elevator, sometimes nothing more than the simple knowing that the other existed. It was not love yet, but it was something real, something fragile, like a flame sheltered from the wind, and neither of them wanted to let it go. As Rachel tucked Sophia into bed that night, she whispered, "You are my reason for everything, baby girl." But in her chest, another truth flickered softly, the sense that maybe, just maybe, someone else was beginning to care about them too. The next few weeks moved quickly, each day settling into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Rachel balanced spreadsheets by day and bedtime stories by night, her life divided neatly between professionalism and motherhood. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet anticipation grew, like the calm before an unspoken truth. James Carter had become a steady presence in her workdays. Their interactions were brief but meaningful, threaded with mutual respect and something softer neither dared to name. One Tuesday afternoon, he called her into his office. "We are hosting an investor dinner this Friday," he said. "I would like you to attend." Rachel blinked. "Me? Sir, I think someone from senior management would be more appropriate." "I am not asking for management," he said gently. "I am asking for someone I trust. You have a rare understanding of both numbers and people. That combination matters." She hesitated, unsure whether to feel honored or anxious. "If you are sure," she said finally. "I am sure," he replied. "Dress comfortably. It is a private event at the Meridian rooftop." Friday evening arrived with the kind of golden light that made the city shimmer. Rachel stood before her small mirror, adjusting the soft navy dress she had borrowed from Carmen. It was modest yet graceful, a world away from her usual office wear. Sophia giggled nearby as Carmen braided her hair. "You look beautiful," Carmen said. "If this CEO of yours does not notice, he must be blind." Carmen, Rachel warned, though her cheeks flushed. It is work, not a date. Uh-huh, her sister teased. Just make sure work buys dessert. Rachel laughed and kissed Sophia's forehead before leaving. The rooftop was breathtaking, soft music playing, strings of light swaying gently in the breeze, and the skyline glowing in the distance. Rachel felt small yet strangely calm among the quiet elegance. James greeted her near the entrance, dressed in a charcoal suit, his expression warm but unreadable. "You made it," he said. "I was beginning to think you changed your mind." "I almost did," she admitted, "but I figured I might never see a view like this again." "You might be surprised," he said, gesturing for her to follow. The dinner was intimate, no more than a dozen guests, including board members and long-time investors. Rachel listened more than she spoke, offering insights when asked. To her relief, James occasionally directed questions her way, his confidence in her steady and reassuring. Midway through the evening, as laughter rippled through the table, a woman in a red dress approached James. "There you are," she said with practiced familiarity. "You missed my call earlier." "Apologies, Claire," he said politely. "We are in the middle of a discussion." "You always are," she replied, her tone sharp as her gaze shifted toward Rachel. "And who is this?" Rachel stood quickly. "Rachel Martinez from accounting," she said. Claire's smile was polite but cool. "Accounting," she repeated. "How refreshing." Rachel forced a polite nod, her pulse quickening. James sensed the tension immediately. "Rachel helped identify a major financial discrepancy last quarter," he said firmly. "Her work saved us a significant loss." Claire arched a brow but said nothing, retreating with a smirk that lingered too long. Rachel exhaled quietly, trying to focus on her plate. When the dinner finally ended, the guests began to disperse. James found her near the balcony, her arms resting on the railing as the wind tugged lightly at her hair. "You handled that well," he said softly. "Claire can be direct." "She seems close to you," Rachel said, unable to hide the hint of curiosity. "We have known each other for years," he replied, "but she belongs to a world I stopped caring about a long time ago." He looked out at the skyline. "That world values power over people. I am trying to unlearn that." Rachel met his gaze. "And are you?" "Trying," he said with a quiet smile. "But some lessons take time." They stood together in silence, the city lights shimmering below. For the first time in years, Rachel felt seen not as a struggling single mother or an employee, but as herself, and though neither spoke it aloud, they both sensed the fragile line between gratitude and something deeper beginning to blur in the glow of the night. The following Monday brought a chill that matched the grey sky outside Meridian Tower. Rachel arrived early as usual, her mind still half caught between the glow of Friday night and the uneasy questions that lingered afterward. She had barely slept since the dinner. The way James had defended her in front of his peers had felt both comforting and dangerous, like a warmth she was not supposed to touch. The office buzzed with post-event chatter. Some congratulated her for being part of the investor dinner. Others offered knowing looks that carried more curiosity than kindness. Rachel kept her head down and focused on work, pretending not to notice. By late afternoon, she received a message from Human Resources requesting her presence. Her pulse quickened as she walked toward the office, the sterile hallway suddenly feeling colder. Inside sat Miss Langford and the HR director, both wearing polite, unreadable expressions. "Rachel," the director began, "there have been concerns raised about your relationship with Mr. Carter." Rachel froze. "My relationship?" she repeated. "There is no relationship. Several employees have reported that you received preferential treatment," Miss Langford added. "They mentioned you were invited to a private company dinner." "That dinner was for work," Rachel said quickly. "I was there because Mr. Carter asked me to represent the accounting department. That is all." The director nodded. "We understand, but appearances matter. We need to ensure fairness across all departments." Rachel felt her throat tighten. "Are you saying I am being disciplined for doing my job?" "Not at all," Miss Langford replied smoothly. "But we are recommending that your future assignments be approved through senior management rather than directly by Mr. Carter." The words stung, polite but sharp. It was clear what they meant. Distance yourself from him. Rachel walked out of the meeting with her chest burning. She went straight to the elevator, her reflection in the mirrored wall pale and tired. When the doors opened on the executive floor, she hesitated, then stepped out. James looked up from his desk as she entered, concern immediately flashing across his face. "Rachel? What happened?" She took a steady breath. "Human resources called me in. They said people are talking." His jaw tightened. "About us?" "About you helping me," she corrected. "They think I am getting special treatment. They want to limit my assignments." James's expression darkened. "That is absurd. You earned everything through your work." "I know," she said quietly, "but they do not care. You are the CEO. I am the woman who sat beside you on a plane. That is all they see." He stood, pacing slowly behind his desk. "I will talk to them." "Please do not," she said quickly. "It will only make things worse. I just wanted you to know." For a long moment, he said nothing. The air between them felt heavy with all the things they could not say. Finally, he stopped and looked at her. "Rachel, I never meant to make things harder for you." "You did not," she replied. "You made me believe I could stand on my own again. That means more than you know." Her voice trembled slightly, but she held his gaze. "Now I just have to prove it." He exhaled slowly. "You should not have to prove anything to anyone." "Maybe not," she said, "but this is the world we live in." She turned to leave, her heart pounding. As she reached the door, James's voice stopped her. "Rachel." She looked back. "If I step back, it is not because I want to," he said softly. "It is because I have to." She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. The elevator doors closed between them a moment later, and James stood staring at the empty hallway. In that instant, both of them understood that the distance they were being forced to keep was not born of indifference, but of something far more dangerous, a connection neither status nor gossip could erase. The next few days moved like slow motion, heavy with silence. Rachel kept her distance, throwing herself into work with mechanical focus. The whispers in the office eventually faded, replaced by new gossip about other things, but the air between her and James Carter had changed. He no longer stopped by her desk or lingered after meetings. Their conversations became brief, polite, and carefully professional. It was the right thing to do, she reminded herself. Still, every time she passed his office and saw the door slightly open, she felt the ache of absence. On Friday evening, when the office was nearly empty, Rachel packed her things and glanced at the framed picture of Sophia on her desk. The smile of her baby girl reminded her what all of this was for. Stability, dignity, a life she could be proud of. As she stepped out into the hallway, her phone buzzed. It was a message from James. "Can you meet me at the community center tomorrow morning? It is about the charity program you worked on." She hesitated, staring at the words. It was the first message he had sent her in over a week. After a long pause, she typed back, "I will be there." The next morning was bright and cold, the kind of early spring day when the sunlight seemed sharper than usual. The Meridian Community Center buzzed with volunteers, sorting supplies and children running through the yard. Rachel spotted James near the donation table, dressed in a simple grey sweater instead of his usual tailored suit. He looked up and smiled faintly when he saw her. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I know things have been complicated." "You could say that," she replied, folding her arms against the chill. "You mentioned the charity program." "Yes," he said. "We are expanding it. I want you to lead the accounting oversight. It will be separate from your current department. No politics. No interference." Rachel blinked. "You are offering me another position." "A promotion," he clarified. "Officially approved by the board. You have earned it, Rachel. I wanted you to hear it from me." She was stunned. "I do not know what to say." "Say yes," he said quietly. "You built this program from the ground up. You deserve to see it grow." Her chest tightened. "And the rumors?" "Let them talk," he said. "You do not need to hide your hard work to make other people comfortable." She smiled slightly, touched by his words but cautious. "It feels like you are always fixing the messes that come from helping me." "Maybe," he admitted, "but I do not regret a single one." For a moment, they stood in silence, the noise of volunteers echoing softly around them. Rachel looked at him then, really looked. The man before her was not just a CEO. He was someone who carried the weight of power with grace, who had learned that strength did not always mean control. "Thank you," she said finally, "not just for the job, for believing in me when I stopped believing in myself." His eyes softened. "You did that all on your own, Rachel. I just reminded you who you were." She nodded, trying to hide the emotion in her eyes. He took a small envelope from his coat, and handed it to her. "There is something else," he said. "A donation to the daycare across the street from your apartment. They are expanding their staff. It should make things easier for parents like you." Rachel hesitated. "You did not have to." "I wanted to," he said. "It is not charity. It is fairness." The sincerity in his voice left her speechless. As he turned to help a group of volunteers lift boxes, Rachel stood there watching him, realizing that their worlds would never truly be the same again. For once, power and kindness were standing side by side, and she felt something inside her shift. When she looked down at the envelope in her hands, she smiled through tears. She did not try to hide. Sometimes fate did not bring people together to change the world. Sometimes it simply reminded them how to be human again. The following weeks moved like a quiet turning tide. Rachel stepped into her new role overseeing the charity program's finances, and for the first time in years, she felt both stable and purposeful. The new office was small but full of life, with volunteers dropping by and laughter echoing through the halls. Her days were long, but her heart was light. She saw James occasionally during project meetings, though their conversations remained professional, careful, always surrounded by others. Still, their eyes met more often than their words did, and in those silent exchanges lay everything they could not say aloud. One Thursday afternoon, Rachel was reviewing budget reports when she received a message from James's assistant asking her to deliver a file to his penthouse office. It was unusual, but she agreed. As the elevator climbed to the top floor, her reflection in the mirrored wall looked composed but nervous. When the doors opened, she found James standing by the tall windows, city lights beginning to flicker below. "You came," he said with a faint smile. "I was starting to think you had found an excuse to avoid me." "Avoid you?" she asked, setting the folder on his desk. "You are my boss, not a secret." "Some people prefer to keep their distance," he said lightly, then turned serious. "I wanted to thank you in person. The expansion program exceeded expectations. Because of your oversight, we will be able to support 3 more community centers next quarter." Rachel smiled, genuine and proud. "It was a team effort." "You always say that," he said, "but you forget to include yourself in the word team." "I am used to being in the background," she admitted softly. "It is safer there." "Safe," he repeated quietly, walking closer. "You deserve more than safe, Rachel." His voice was gentle, not commanding, and for a moment she forgot to breathe. "James," she began, "we cannot—" "I know," he said, cutting her off gently. "You do not have to explain. The world loves its lines, and we are standing right on one." His honesty disarmed her. She wanted to tell him how much his belief in her had changed everything, how his kindness had reminded her of a world she thought she no longer belonged in. But words felt too fragile. Instead, she said, "I am grateful, truly. But I cannot let people think I got here because of you." "Then prove them wrong," he said simply. "Do it so well they will forget to question how you began." She nodded slowly, understanding that this was not a promise of love or even a confession. It was something deeper, built on respect. Before she could respond, the sound of a phone vibrating broke the silence. James glanced at the screen and sighed. "The board wants an early report on next quarter's numbers. It never ends." Rachel smiled faintly. "Then I should go before they think I am part of your conspiracy." He chuckled softly. "They already do." As she turned to leave, he called after her, "Rachel." She stopped, her hand on the elevator button. "Yes, no matter what they say, I am proud of you," he said quietly, "and I hope one day you will be proud of yourself too." The doors closed before she could answer, but his words lingered long after. That night, when she returned home, Sophia was already asleep. The small apartment was dim, the only light coming from the soft glow of a lamp near the crib. Rachel stood by her daughter, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "We are going to be okay," she whispered. "We are going to be more than okay." For the first time in years, she believed it. Outside, the city pulsed with quiet life, and somewhere in a glass tower not far away, James Carter stood by his window, thinking of the woman who had taught him that sometimes strength was not in power but in grace. 6 months later, spring returned to the city, and with it came a quiet sense of renewal. The Meridian Foundation's community expansion had become a remarkable success, featured in newspapers and praised across the city. Rachel had grown into her role with confidence and poise, her name now spoken with respect even by those who once whispered behind her back. She never sought attention, but her work spoke louder than any defense she could have offered. Life settled into rhythm, morning walks with Sophia, long days at the office, and peaceful evenings in their small apartment that now felt less like a shelter and more like a home. On a clear Friday afternoon, Rachel was preparing financial statements for an upcoming event when an email from James's office arrived. It was an invitation to the Meridian Spring Gala, a formal celebration for the company's charitable achievements. She hesitated before opening it fully. The event would be filled with executives, donors, and board members, all the people who lived in a world far from her own. For a long moment she considered declining. Then she remembered what James had told her. Prove them wrong. The night of the gala arrived under a sky scattered with stars. The ballroom shimmered with golden lights and soft music. Rachel wore a simple ivory dress that Carmen had altered for her, elegant without being extravagant. When she entered, the hum of conversation paused for a second, just long enough for people to notice her, before turning back to their drinks. She found comfort in the anonymity of it. Across the room, James Carter stood near the stage, greeting guests with his usual quiet authority. When his eyes found hers, the noise around them seemed to fade. He approached, calm and poised, offering a smile that reached his eyes. "You came," he said softly. "I was not sure you would." "You invited me," she replied. It seemed rude to say no. "You never were rude," he said, amusement flickering in his voice. "Only brave." Before she could respond, the host called for attention. James was invited to the stage to deliver his speech. He spoke about the growth of the foundation, the importance of community, and the belief that real change begins with compassion. Then, as he concluded, he said, "There is one person I want to acknowledge tonight, someone who reminded me that leadership is not about power, but about purpose." His gaze moved toward Rachel. "Miss Rachel Martinez, would you stand?" The room turned. Rachel froze, her heart pounding. Applause began, soft at first, then growing until it filled the room. She stood, cheeks flushed, nodding slightly in thanks. When the event ended, she slipped outside onto the terrace to breathe. The city stretched below, lights flickering like distant constellations. A moment later, James joined her. "You should be proud," he said quietly. "You did this." "We did this," she corrected. "You gave me a chance." "You gave yourself one," he replied. "All I did was notice." They stood in silence, the cool air brushing against them, the hum of the city far below. "So what happens now?" she asked finally. "Now," he said, smiling faintly, "now you keep doing what you were always meant to do. Build, inspire, lead, and maybe," he added softly, "remember that not everyone who sits beside you on a flight is a stranger." She laughed, a sound that carried warmth and peace. "I do not think I could forget." As she turned to leave, James said her name once more. "Rachel." She looked back. "Yes?" "You reminded me what it means to be human," he said simply. "Thank you." She smiled, eyes glistening. "You reminded me that kindness is still out there," she whispered. Then she walked back into the ballroom, where laughter and light awaited. From the terrace, James watched her go, the faintest hint of pride in his eyes. He had built empires, commanded rooms, and won battles. But tonight, standing in the quiet glow of the city, he realized something profound. He had everything money could buy, yet it was her grace that had given him something he had long forgotten, the feeling of being human again. In this emotional cinematic tale of fate and redemption, a struggling single mother's unexpected encounter with a powerful CEO on a late-night flight unfolds into one of the most heartfelt millionaire stories ever told. From exhaustion and despair to hope and courage, she finds herself rediscovering kindness in a world ruled by power. Across quiet offices, city lights, and whispered confessions, their paths intertwine, revealing that even the wealthiest hearts can still long for something real. This modern fairy tale blends humanity and humility, showing that true wealth lies not in money but in empathy and second chances, perfect for fans of emotional storytelling and touching millionaire stories that celebrate resilience, dignity, and love beyond social class. Through moments of sacrifice, misunderstanding, and connection, this story reminds us that compassion can bridge worlds, turning strangers into saviors and loneliness into belonging. Filled with cinematic depth and timeless lessons, This piece stands among the most inspiring millionaire stories that capture the beauty of redemption and the power of quiet kindness. Watch, listen, and feel the transformation of two souls, proving that even in a ruthless world, millionaire stories can still end with grace, hope, and the reminder that being human is the greatest fortune of all.